This is our postponed meeting from Tuesday, April 28th. And I'll begin, as always, with public input on anything not on the agenda. And just for the sake of clarity, that includes, if anybody's got questions about the police chief situation, go ahead, we'll do our best. And by the way, for tonight's meeting, other than the selectmen, everyone's going to be muted. If you want to speak, raise your hand, either physically wave or use your electronic hand in Zoom. Any public comment?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to point out that we have a couple of birthdays that might want to be observed.
Could we, Brian, can I just see if there's anything else first?
Sure.
Is there any other public comment?
Steve, Jim?
Yes,
I have one.
Linda.
I just wanted to let you know that as of yesterday, Stow's response to the 2020 census, the federal census, tiny little Stow was leading the Commonwealth. We were first, 351 towns. Bolton is slightly behind us.
It's pretty good.
So I want to thank all the people who are watching and all who've responded. There's still more time to do that, but the assistant town clerk and I challenged my colleagues in the abutting towns, and there would be a donation to the food pantry of the winning town.
Great.
So I was going to get a donation.
Terrific. Thank you, Linda.
You're welcome.
Linda, do you want to put in a plug for your vote by mail?
Sure. The Action Unlimited, you all should have received an Action Unlimited, and there are absentee ballot applications inside the center that you can tear out and drop off. I'm up to, I think I've received 60 so far since we started advertising the vote by mail. So if you have any questions, you can go online. There's information, there's applications online, and there's going to be a lot of stuff generated. So if anybody wants to vote in June, look for the applications.
Thank you, Linda. Anyone else before I go to Brian? So I don't see anybody. Brian?
Just wanted to point out that it is the birthday of our administrative assistant and the chair of our finance committee.
Oh, I didn't realize. Happy birthday to both of you. Maureen. Happy birthday, Maureen. Rich.
Thank you.
Rich, happy birthday. May Day birthday. Not auspicious to put the guy at the head of the finance committee who has a birthday on May Day, but okay.
Comrade Rich.
Comrade Rich. Comrade Eckel. Thank you, Comrade Eckel. Chairman's comments, just a couple of things. I want to mention that the blue lights have been up at Pompo for Autism Awareness Month since April 2nd, I think. They're going to stay up for a while in honor of our public safety and first responder personnel who are on the front line of the coronavirus emergency. And I want to tell you the Stow Council on Aging is still available. They are available for support during the coronavirus pandemic. Their primary concern is keeping Stow seniors healthy, safe, and engaged. The Pompo Community Center is closed, of course. However, the staff continues to work during this pandemic by helping folks contact-free. We are available Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. to assist with a variety of services such as food, durable medical equipment, fuel assistance, and much more. We are offering some of our regularly scheduled programs such as exercise classes on Stow TV, YouTube, and live remote Zoom classes. For more information, please go to the town website, the Council on Aging page. That's stow-ma.gov/council-aging, and or check out our monthly newsletter, which is mailed to every household with the Action Unlimited at the beginning of the month. If you or someone you know could benefit from our services, please contact us at 978-897-1880. And of course, I think most of us probably heard that earlier today, Governor Baker issued or amended his prior executive order requiring that that after May 6, 2020, masks be worn in places in public where you cannot social distance. Everyone should be aware of that. I think the town may have a role in enforcing that. All right, minutes. We had 2 sets of minutes in our packet. And Maureen, you distributed the edits I made, right?
Not yet, no.
Oh, okay.
They
So-
have the regular.
So I made some edits to the 2 sets of minutes. Why don't we start with the minutes of April 14th? I can tell you, I took out, on the minutes of April 14th, I asked Maureen to take out the first chairman's comment. She repeated it, so it just has one. And under reopen, close annual town meeting warrant, it just said Courtney moved Brian. She's going to complete that sentence. Did anybody have anything else on the minutes of April 14th?
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes of April 14th as amended.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to accept the minutes of April 14, 2020 as amended. Further discussion? Seeing and hearing none. All those in favor, we got to do this by a roll call. I'm looking at Courtney. Courtney?
Aye.
Brian?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. All right. And minutes of April 22. This is our emergency meeting of last week. I made 2 comments or 2 edits. The first sentence under appoint acting police chief, it repeated the phrase explained that Sergeant Darren Thrain, so it took that out. And the adjournment, it was 7 colon, so I think Maureen's putting in the correct time, 7, 20, and 22 or something. Any further comments on these minutes?
Jim, was John actually physically there?
John was not physically there. John was on the telephone, and so you're right. So Maureen, if it could reflect that town council John Whitten was available by phone, thank you. Anybody else? Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion. Go ahead. Go for it. Go ahead.
I move to accept the meeting minutes of April 22nd as amended.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to accept the meeting minutes of April 22nd as amended. Further discussion? Seeing and hearing none. All those in favor, please, roll call vote. Mr. Ryan?
Yay.
Ms. Fracia?
Aye.
And Mr. Burke?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. All right, thank you very much. That takes care of the minutes. Correspondence. So Maureen scanned and sent us all the electronic correspondence. Did anybody see anything in there for a future agenda item?
I'm good.
Okay. Going once, going twice? Nothing? Okay, very good. And in my list of participants, do I see Martha? I do see Martha Monroe. Hi, Martha. You're muted and not visible. How are you? Are you there? Yes?
Okay.
I can. Hi, Martha.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
So, you had sent us a email a while back asking us what to do about, well, for those unfamiliar, Martha Monroe, I think it's Colonel Martha Monroe, is chair of the Veterans Graves Committee, and sent us an email a while back asking us for our thoughts on what to do about the Memorial Day Parade at the end of this month. I'm going to turn that back on you, at least initially, and ask you if you have any thoughts. It seemed like from your email like you're thinking about a ceremony, but an abbreviated one. Is that right?
Yeah, I was. I did reach out to Kate Hogan and Senator Eldridge to find out what the other towns were doing. I have not heard from Eldridge, but Kate Hogan came back and said that Maynard at least had canceled their parade, and she was suspecting that the other towns would follow suit. So, given the situation at this point in time, there's usually a lot of preparation that goes into the parade that I would usually have started in March or so to do. Working with the high school band, working with the school to get the 8th grade readers, the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, just reaching out and making sure we had various participation for putting the flags out, things like that. With the situation right now, I have not been able to work with the principal of the school or the band director or anybody. So I really, if we do a parade, it would have to be greatly abbreviated, maybe just something around the memorial. But now with the current, stay-at-home order in place, and then the social distancing that's still needed, and usually the participation is an older crowd and very young children. I would say at this time that it might be safer to cancel the parade.
Okay. Comments from other selectmen?
I ended up, when I saw this on our agenda, one of the things I did is I kind of reached out to Chief Landry to find out what his thoughts might be. And after discussing it with him, we figured that probably a parade is not advisable at this point. However, I did ask him about also seeing if the fire department, who usually provides the color guard, would be willing to do that so that we could have a small ceremony, something like that. And he felt as long as we could properly socially distance and not, essentially it would be inadvisable to have the public attend. He suggested that it could be taped for Stow TV, and we could make sure that we put on, a small ceremony, and then if we planned on something like that, if the stay-at-home order was lifted by that point, then the public could be invited. But he didn't recommend. He recommended against having a parade, which I tend to agree with.
Well, let's go back to Martha, because whatever happens is going to be work for her. Martha, I think it goes without saying that the usual parade is out of the question at this point. As of March 18th, the current stay-at-home order will be lifted, but we're not sure what it will be replaced by. Is something along the lines of what Tom is talking about feasible? And please feel free to say no. It's very close to down to the wire.
We could do a color guard to, assuming you're meaning to just place the wreaths. I don't know if we want to do that at both locations.
No.
No.
I think I think Tom and I are probably sharing a brain on this, probably just at the War Memorial at the library.
Okay.
Yeah, either that or the cemetery, one or the other.
Yeah.
Without walking in between, closing streets, things like that. So, my thought was, to try to provide a little bit of normalcy in these abnormal times and make sure that we remember our veterans. And as I said, we could, it would be asking people not to attend. So that, because we couldn't, under the current guidelines, we couldn't have even 40 or 50 people on the common, even if they were spread out. We could have a couple of dignitaries, people that were, potentially the selectmen, maybe Jamie and maybe Kate, and I think the veterans who would probably know how to take orders and stay spread apart, something like that, I think would probably be supported by public safety.
It'll grow, Tom, as you indicated. It'll grow.
It'll grow, but I think that, in all fairness, we've just got to ask people to stay at home and watch it on TV. And it's, our veterans have made sacrifices. Now it's time for people to make the sacrifice and do what's right.
So Martha, let me turn it back to you again. Would you be willing to contact Chief Landry and see if you can flesh out something along these lines?
Yeah, of course. So I think if we don't publish a time and we just go ahead and plan it with the color guard, I'll work with Chief Landry. I need to see if wreaths can even be
Right,
donated at this point in time.
right.
Maybe we do it at 9 a.m. in the morning or something
Yeah,
early, and I can see if Kate still wants to
Say-
attend or not.
right. If Kate wants to say a few words, that'll be fine. That'll be something.
Okay, and then the selectmen would know. I don't know how to reach out to our other veterans without starting to make it get public.
I don't think, I hate to say it, I don't think you do. I think we, as Tom says, we have Stow TV film it, and we run it, and that's how they participate. So, again, maybe reach out to Chief Landry, but like Tom, I'm thinking the selectmen, Kate, Jamie if he wants to, the color guard, and that's about it. Your committee.
Okay. I don't think we'd have anybody to do a taps or anything like that either.
Why don't you think about it, see if you can pull it together, and feel free to say you can't pull it together, or it'll be so short and abbreviated that it makes no sense. But I know I was thinking along the same lines Tom was. Can we do something to just mark the occasion?
Okay, yeah, I'll reach out to the band director and see if there is somebody that, a bugler that could come down and at least do taps.
That'll be,
So, in my mind, if we do this, it will be kind of short and sweet. We will just set up the color guard, have them place the wreaths, and do taps if possible.
I think that's fine.
Okay.
Well, one of the things, and I don't know your thought, Martha, is probably one of the things that I've found most moving, and I think might be appropriate, and I'd be willing to do it, is reading the names of all Stow, the people who died in, in the various wars. I've always found that one of the most moving sections,
Okay.
and I don't think it would add that much time, but
No.
it would show that we're remembering them the way we have for, as far as I've been in town, and probably long before that.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Okay. And so you're volunteering to do that?
I'll do that, and, one of the other things too is I'm guessing that, I think Ann Needle is on here, and I'll bet you if they put something in the paper saying we were looking for somebody to play taps, I'm guessing that we could find a bugler here in town. And they could, if it's okay with Jim, if there are any buglers out there, could they contact the selectman's office and volunteer their services, Jim?
That's fine. I think at this point, we should let Martha try to flesh this out.
Okay.
And then,
Yeah, let me try to run that down first. I can see if either someone from the band or maybe the Minutemen.
yeah, I'm very conscious here that 2 months that she usually has to put this together are gone. So let's let her tell us what is feasible and what's not. But that is a good idea.
The other thing that we usually do is placing the flags on the grave sites. We do that early Saturday morning. We use the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts to do that. Obviously, it would be very hard to keep the kids, I think, separated to do that. Myself and Tom Zaborski can try to go up and do it, but it might be helpful to try to get a couple of other adults to help us do that?
Well,
Sign me up.
sign me up too. And you may just want to talk to JP. He may be able to get some of the older scouts too that would stay separated, and it might be good for them to learn to take direction
Yeah.
if he was able to do that. And I don't know who's running the Girl Scouts, but it would be the same thing with them. Some of the older scouts that might not, if as long as they felt that they would be able to take direction and stay separated appropriately.
Right, I will try that. I should be able to know if I can get it pulled together by, definitely, if I don't have it pulled together by the 8th, then it's not happening. So give me the weekend and the week to reach out and contact people and have them reach back to me. Jim, should I let you know directly or go through Maureen?
Send an email to the Selectmen's office, but CC me
Okay,
personally, and let me know if you need me and/or Tom
okay.
to plant
great.
flags.
If you can CC me also, I may contact you offline. I've got one other slight idea that we don't need to hash out here.
Okay, Tom Ryan, I don't know how to reach out to you.
It's, you can just send it to Maureen and she'll get it to me.
Okay, great.
And,
I think it's
or you,
Thomas Ryan, all one word, at stow-ma.gov.
Okay, I will do that.
But it's your
And
call,
so
Martha.
right now, like I said, I'll go for a time of 9 o'clock and we'll work towards that.
Okay. It's your call. All right?
Okay, thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks for raising it.
Okay.
Thanks for doing
thank
it.
you.
Bye.
Bye. All right, next on our agenda, I think, is a presentation on our highway, long-range highway work, but I think that's going to take a little bit of time. Is Steve with us? Steve Nadeau?
Nice.
Is he here? Steve, if you don't mind, yes, he is. I want to have our conversation with Rich and Steve Jelinek first, because that will take less time, and then we'll get to you. And is it okay, Steve?
That's fine with me.
Okay, thanks. And if I could get Steve Jelinek and Rich Eckel unmuted.
Hey, Joe.
Hey, Rich. Is Steve unmuted?
Yep, I think so.
Great. So this is really just a short discussion. I just want to keep the rest of the selectmen informed about long-range capital projects. It comes from some of the conversations that the three of us, Steve, Rich, and me, and Bill Wrigley have been having in informal get-togethers. We're approaching a point where long-range, there are some very high-ticket items coming down the pike. It seems too early to do anything formal, like an oversight committee. I don't know how you do that when money hasn't even been appropriated for these things, but I just want to put these things on people's radar. And the best guy to describe what we are talking about here, I think, is the chair of the Capital Planning Committee. Best chair of any committee, in my opinion, in this town, Mr. Jelinek. You want to take it away?
Well, I think you're talking about having the best committee, not necessarily the best chair.
Nicely done.
We just wish that was saying more.
Steve?
So I would say the four things that folks, if they're not already aware of, ought to be aware of, are the fact that the high school, the district is talking about building a new high school, sometime in the next, I don't know, certainly 10 years. They're in the, they're in the MSBA queue, and I think they're asking us for money as part of the warrant to share for the feasibility study to the tune of $2 million across the district. We don't yet know what the price tag of that whole thing is going to be. We don't have any idea what, if anything, if they get accepted, what they're going to get money from the state for. I can imagine the state's finances are going to be screwed up for quite a number of years. So, all bets are sort of not off as far as this goes. But, the high school building project is going to be a road project, and we are going to have to consider what that does to our finances. Closer to home, we've all heard the news about, PFAS substances being found in the test wells throughout town. We will have an item on the warrant this year for, for some sort of interim funding to kind of figure out the scope of exactly what that issue is going to look like. Hiring a licensed site professional and perhaps some legal services as well to, sort all that out. But it wouldn't be unreasonable to expect that over the course of a few years, we could be looking at $1 million for, PFAS remediation. Certainly at the old fire station is, one hotspot. There could be other places in town where, the state, could very easily kind of point to us as being the responsible party for it. So that's something else that we ought to have on our radar and be planning for. I think folks are well aware that the library has been waiting an awful long time to have a better library space, and so there's another project that a few years ago was on the order of $2 to $4 million. Now, who knows? We could be looking at a $5 to $7 million project there. And last but certainly not least on the list is the renovation to the town hall. We've sort of started and stopped on this project, but again, depending on the extent of the renovation that folks might be looking at as far as that goes, we could be looking at another multi-million-dollar project there. So, over the course of the next 10 years, from a long-range perspective, there's an awful lot of stuff we could potentially be facing. And that's not to, belittle the fact that we have our normal capital items that folks look for from every department every year. This year the request in the warrant is on the order of $750,000, and looking out over the course of the next 5 years, we're looking at a set of plans anyway. The total on the order of $3.1 million or something on the order of $640,000 per year, which is a sort of a normal 5-year look for us. Anyway, you sort of tack all these things on top of each other, and you very quickly begin to think about how can we best sort of plan for this all to, not swamp us at any one point in time. So I guess I'll stop there and ask if folks have any questions, or ask if Rich wants to sort of add anything to that.
No, that you summed it up great from the finance committee's perspective. We're just looking at the current debt load that we have. Thankfully the finances of the town are in excellent shape and have been well stewarded. But we have, if I added this up, it's over $100 million that we may need to spend if all these things come over, maybe even higher, closer to $200 million. So this is stuff that we need to plan for and budget for. So I'm glad that we're doing this.
Steve, I'm going to add one thing to your list, which is in the next 5 to 10 years, I have no doubt that some golf course is going to come out of Chapter 61, and the town will have to make a decision about whether or not to spend some money to purchase all or part of it. And there will no doubt be advocates for that, and probably good ideas. So that's it's unclear exactly what it'll be, but I'm going to bet something like that is going to happen.
Yeah, that's not an unreasonable assumption. The fact that we have a little bit better understanding of what the other 4 things are, kind of put them on my list. As far as the $100 million or whatever number that Rich is talking about, that would be including, the high school building. Some of that money, of course, would be reimbursed by the state. We don't have yet how much. So again, not knowing exactly what it might look like in terms of a land purchase associated with one of the golf courses deciding to sell. Yeah, I'd say that's also on the list. I mean, I did hear one recommendation that golfing is the one thing you can sort of do outdoors and be socially distanced. So perhaps golf is going to see a
renaissance.
innovation.
So let me open this up for any questions or comments from my fellow selectmen, and then I'm actually going to take any comments from the public. Fellow selectmen, anything?
Thank you very much, Steve and Rich.
Tom, anything? Courtney?
Thank you for putting these back
Anybody else have anything to say? I'm having a hard time seeing the electronic hands, but any members of the public want to comment or ask any questions? I'm not seeing anything. All right, guys, thank you very much. Appreciate the update, and I may ask you to do it again as everything goes forward. I think this is a topic we need to keep on the front burner for everyone, for the whole town.
Well,
Thank you. Steve Nadeau, you still with us? Yes, you are. I see you there, but you're not unmuted. Now you're unmuted. So Steve Nadeau, you wanted to do a presentation on upcoming highway work. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to do the share screen function. We've disabled that. But all the selectmen have a copy of your PowerPoint.
Chairman, members of the board, thank you for the time. I do understand, so I'm able to at least talk through, and you guys all have copies so you can follow along.
I can.
barely.
Jim, if you want Steve to be able to share his screen, we can make that happen.
Okay. Steve, do you want to do that?
That's fine. We can do that. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Courtney, you good with the volume?
Yes, that's better. Thank you.
I'm good.
And Kathy, can we enable share screen for him?
I thought we could, but now I'm not sure. Ron may have turned it off. Do you see share screen, Steve?
Down at the bottom. No, I don't.
I think Ron has disabled it, so
I don't either.
I was mistaken. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's all right. So Steve, please proceed, knowing that the selectmen at least have copies in their materials.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you for the time. I'm here to talk to you tonight about pavement management and this year's road resurfacing program that I put together based on the pavement management system that's been around through Bay State Roads and UMass Amherst Transportation Center. So tonight we'll talk about roadway evaluation real quick, the network modeling that I've put together, the roads that we've selected in-house for this year, and then just a quick rundown on the cost per mile. That's the current cost basis for a lot of the different treatments that are in the toolbox for the highway department to use to keep our roads in good condition. And some of these treatments haven't been used in town in quite a few years, and I'm looking to bring one new treatment that hasn't been used yet in town, but is a key component to keep our streets looking good and staying in good condition. As we all know, products over the last 30 years are no longer what they were when some of us were growing up. The lifespan has been shortened, and so is the lifespan of asphalt. It's no longer 30 years, it's about 15. So I've taken into account the funding sources to come up with a new plan. I've been going around doing a complete survey of the town roads, taking into account its length, its width, the type of surface it's in, and the average traffic per day on those roads. Factors that I look at is the types of distress, cracks, potholes, sinking, the severity of how bad those are in the road, and to the extent of the percentage of the roadway affected. So when you see cracks in the road, if there's just minor cracks, that's not a very big percent. But if you drive some of our roads, there is a lot of major cracking in the roadways, which, as we all know, in New England, in the wintertime, rain and freezing temperatures creates our pothole condition, which drives up my operating costs. So I've taken all this into consideration. Currently, the town of Stow receives $283,000 a year, approximately, out of Chapter 90 funding. This is based on 55 miles of roads that have been accepted by the town as public ways and have been implemented into the state's program of an accepted road. We have approximately 5 miles of roads in town that are private ways and are only funded for repairs, minor repairs, through a town warrant article that's funded every year. When we get into costs, if we let a road, which seems to be, since I've been here, what I've seen is we do things once it gets into a condition of failure. When we wait to that point to do 1 mile of road, it costs us approximately $280,000. That being said, just to do 1 mile of road, it wipes out my whole budget from the state for a year to do 1 mile. The next technology that's out there, it's called cold in place recycling. It's about $245,000, and that's taking the top layers off, running them through a machine, and not even going back to a plant. They process it in the field and drop it right back on the road. Our most common in-town road resurfacing is what we call a mill and overlay, which is we take out a couple of inches of the asphalt on top and replace it with the same thickness. That's $195,000 a year. There's 2 other treatments in the tool bag that I won't be using this year, but I'll talk about them. One is called the Cape Seal. The cost per mile is about $87,000. Another one is called the Micro Surface. That's about $74,000. The other 2 treatments that are in the toolbox that we can use are what we call a fog seal. It's a rejuvenator to the asphalt to help put moisture back into it and help restart the clock for the sun's UV rays at $48,000 a year. And the last is crack sealing. When you see the cracks in the roads, to go back and crack seal those, it's about $9,000 a mile to do crack sealing. This year, Brian and I have gone around, looked at the roads. Tentative roads that we're looking at to pave this year, which would be a mill and overlay, would be State Road, because of its traffic volume for one, and 2 is a lot of the outer edges are falling apart, and we're spending a lot of time and money out there to repair them. So we're going to do State Road from the Hudson Town line to the Sudbury Town line, and then go in approximately 200 feet on the Sudbury Road to redo that intersection to tie it all in nicely. We're going to do Wedgewood Road, which was approved last year at annual town meeting. It's been delayed due to our workload, so that will be done this year. And then the section of Packard Road, a lot of the guys call it Packard Road Extension, it goes between Foxborough Road and Harvard Road, which is pretty bad.
Do you mean Taylor?
Oh, you're right, sorry, Taylor Road. And then I plan on crack sealing approximately 10 miles of road, and 2 miles of road would be seal coated for terms that people know that do their driveways. It's called fog seal in the pavement industry, but it would rejuvenate the dried out asphalt and give us a longer lifespan to do that. Since I can't share the screen, the other couple of slides just showed members what our residents could expect to see of these type of treatments. And the best way when I talk about fog seal, it's anybody that's had a paved driveway that's ever seal coated their driveway. It rejuvenates your driveway. There's a different blend for commercial roads. It helps reset the clock from the sun drying it out so it doesn't start falling apart on us. And it seals the cracks up for the winter time that are small, whereas crack seals used on bigger cracks that the fog seal won't seal in. And that's my presentation. Just a quick overview of how I came to things, what the expenses are, and trying to live within that 283,000, but yet get a program going to make sure that I'm getting 15 to 20 years out of the roads instead of only waiting till failure. I'd end up behind the what I like to call the curve of trying to keep the roads up. This will help prolong the roads at a much cheaper cost instead of waiting until they're in total failure.
So crack seal and fog seal are not road reconstructions, right? They're just,
No, they're not.
they're sort of,
Anything when you look at the list, Mr. Chairman, that I gave you,
yeah,
when you look at that, the three that are really road reconstructions that are really costly,
or the top three.
Delay, which is the one that the town currently uses the most, cold in-place recycling, and then full depth reclamation. And when they do a full depth, that's literally pulverizing the road back to dirt, and then having a road grader come in and rebuild the whole road.
Right. So Steve, somewhere along the line, some MMA event, I went to some presentation on pavement management, and I seem to remember the first part of it was about assessing and ranking your roads. I want to say 1 to 5. Is that something, am I remembering that correctly? And if so, is that something you plan on doing? It was sort of how they were recommending you determine what roads you need to work on and how badly you need to work on them.
And yes, I have started that. It's very time consuming.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm gonna rank all the roads using the system that Bay State Roads is set up through the UMass program. That I will look at everything and every road will get scorecarded. That is the final goal, that I'll have an interactive map to show what the scores are on each road, where we're at. And my goal is the roads that have been done by the town for the last 7 years, from the 4 to 7 year mark that have been done using Chapter 90, is to go back, because those are all in pretty good shape, is to crack seal them and fog seal them this year so that they continue to stay in great shape, because that's fairly inexpensive money to do that. It's the best way that it's been described when I've gone to the classes for pavement management. It's like buying a new car. You buy a new car and don't do an oil change, how long are you going to get out of it? And you got to look at the road that way. Once you pave a road, you got to continually do minor maintenance and these surface treatments, they call them, because the asphalt no longer lasts the way it used to.
So last question for me. Tell me again what fog sealing is. It looks like it involves spreading oil on the road somehow.
The best way to describe it is anybody that has owned a driveway,
Yeah.
and you have somebody come out and seal coat your driveway, it's the same
Okay.
principle. The only difference is they actually add in the industry, it's called Black Beauty. It's a leftover product from coal-fired plants. They sprinkle that on top of it to give it traction so it doesn't stay slick. Towns are using it all over the place. A perfect example is Lexington. For the last 10 years has been supplementing Chapter 90 and doubling what they get in Chapter 90. Next year, because they've redone all their roads that have been real bad and have been implementing a pavement management system, the town will no longer have to implement more money other than Chapter 90, because they've got everything up to stay within just a maintenance and preventive maintenance stage instead of letting it get into total deterioration. So that's my ultimate goal, is to get it so we really don't have to do milling and paving.
Right.
That we're constantly doing these maintenance treatments to keep our roads in great shape.
Okay.
It'll take me some time, but I'll get there.
Questions from other members of the board?
I just want to say, I've talked to Steve about this a couple times, and I think he's definitely on the right track to, maintain what we've got to make sure that we're not replacing it later on. I think he's got some good ideas. I think some of the stuff we used to do years ago, and he's bringing some of it back, if I'm correct, Steve. Sealing the cracks is probably one of the most cost-effective things you can do to keep the roads from deteriorating. If I recall our conversations correctly.
You are. One of the biggest things that when Brian and myself went to a before the epidemic started, that was the biggest thing the instructors pretty much beat into everybody's head. He couldn't tell us enough how important crack sealing is to protecting our roads. And it's one of the best investments we have and one of the cheapest things that we can do to protect the roads. And you're right, that was being done up until about 8 years ago, and it stopped. And I'm gonna bring it back this year.
So I think he's got some good ideas, and as I said, we've had a couple conversations about this. I definitely think he's on the right track, and he's also looking at some other things. One of the things I know we had a conversation this past winter about, Steve, was actually fixing potholes rather than just filling them. You were talking about using a hot box and, I'll say, doing it right rather than doing it 5 times in the middle of the winter.
Yes, and with the buying of the backhoe last year, there's a new attachment that will allow us to do proper repairs, so that when we do get potholes, we can do something during a snowstorm or a rain to make it safe so we don't have liability. But then we can go back and do a proper repair, much better than the town has ever been able to do in the past.
If I recall, you had mentioned this past winter, down on State Road, there was a hole you filled in 4 or 5 times until you got a chance to do it correctly, and then you were done with it. Once you did get a chance to get it, I think you borrowed a hot box from somebody and then did it, so.
Yeah, we borrowed a hot box from Boxborough. We actually, the year before, the town of Stow went through 7 tons of patch on State Road. Last winter, we used a half a ton because of the hot box, because the patching is just so much better, and having the hot box to bring things up to temperature and do it correctly.
Tom, let me see if any other selectmen have something to say. Brian?
Yep.
Brian, Courtney? Courtney? Courtney, is Courtney muted?
Maybe I'm now unmuted. Thank you.
No, you're good.
Just thank you, Steve, for taking a conservative approach and taking care of the roads. I'm really appreciative of that approach. And I also was just curious, this may not be the moment for this conversation, but I live near that Packard Road extension, and I suspect that the poor condition of the road keeps the speed limit keeps the speed of vehicles down quite a bit. And I wonder if there's any conversation to be Packard Road is quite small, and it gets some big trucks, and it would be great if the speed could be kept low somehow. But I understand the road has deteriorated really badly in that section.
That's the one thing that I don't think any public works department has figured out yet, that when you repave roads, the speeds go up. And then, I hate to say it, when you have roads that are in not so great condition, people tend to drive slower and use more caution. So that the one thing that's nice about that little extension, there is 2 stop signs at both sides, so they can't get going too fast. But that is something that, like I said, it's, once we pave, it does bring the speeds back up because people aren't as cautious and going slow because of road conditions.
Well, it's fun to drive on a new smooth surface. I admit that. Mr. Chairman, is it possible at some other date to have a conversation about restricting some of our roads, restricting large vehicles from the roads? I don't know what's possible there.
So the Complete Streets Committee is, I mean, right now the Assistant Town Planner is putting together a study of accident data on every major road in town. The subject of restricting large trucks has come up before. You know, there are good reasons not to do that. They find a way. They just use another road. But I want to get on this whole subject of traffic safety and speeds. I want to have Complete Streets do a presentation for the selectmen when Valerie's done with her study. It's very interesting how few accidents there are and how many of them are obviously single car accidents that have nothing to do with speed. It's people distracted, if you believe the way the police are coding it, and I'm assuming that that's fairly accurate. It's largely people who are distracted or weather conditions. And she's folding into that same study ticket data. So we can hopefully take a fairly objective look at all of that. I have to agree with you on Packard Road Extension. It's in terrible shape. And unless I'm wrong, in the past 3 years, it's gotten into noticeably worse shape. It doesn't seem to be weathering each winter very well. Can I go on to Brian? Do you have anything to add, Brian?
Just briefly, I think this strategic planning approach is very rewarding and gratifying. I'm glad it's being done. Quick question, what is the work that's being done on Route 62 up near Butternut?
That work is the reliability project that Eversource Gas is doing. They're upping the size of the main to provide build-outs both in Stow that they're envisioning down the road and Maynard. They've backed off on how fast they're doing it because of the moratorium on Lower Village. From what we're getting is because of that road moratorium, they don't want to dig into it and have to redo Lower Village. So they've slowed it down, but this is going to be a slow process over the next 4 or 5 years for them to take this up to Great Road and then down Great Road towards Maynard to feed Stow residents and Maynard.
I thought it had something to do with wires onto the pavement. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Steve, I think that's about it. I very much appreciate all the thought that you've put into this. And I know that there's a road in Sudbury you want me to go bike to see the surface of it. You're going to have to send that to me again, and I will do that.
I will send it to you again. Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next on our agenda is reconstituting or recreating the Randall Library Building Committee. So, by way of background, I can see we have...
It's Tina.
Hi, Tina, yeah.
In Tim's account here.
I was going to say, I was a little confused there. It says Tim Reed, but...
Yeah, no, it's me.
So, last year, at last year's town meeting, the town meeting appropriated $40,000 to basically start concept design process for a renovated extension on the existing Randall Library building.
Yes.
You know, the idea being to take off part of it, probably the quote-unquote new part, and reconstruct it. The trustees formed a building committee. There were some, let's say, inefficiencies in getting the committee started over the summer. And then, of course, the idea of a new library at High Rock came up. So basically, the trustees found themselves, I think this is fair to say, at a point recently where they needed to start this process all over again, because they had decided not to go with High Rock and they were going to go back to their original plan. And in the course of doing that, they decided to ask the selectmen to form to disband the committee they formed last year and ask the selectmen to form a new building committee. Though I believe all or many of the members, the at-large members on the trustees committee would like to serve. Is that fair, Tina?
Yes, yep, that's fair.
Somebody's going to have to mute. Somebody sounds like they're in the middle of making dinner or something. Sounds good, whatever you're doing. So, Tina, you and the trustees have made some suggestions, and if we follow all these suggestions, we'll have a gargantuan committee of about
Yes.
13, I think.
So,
Go ahead.
I would rather, defer to your judgment as you've formed these committees before. That was just kind of a pool of who I thought might be of interest in serving on the committee.
Well, I'm going to make a suggestion. It's by far, this doesn't have to be what we have to do. I think a committee of no more than 7 is probably ideal. And let's keep in mind that this committee can name associates.
Sure. That's something the selectmen do?
No, the committee would name the associates.
Okay.
So naming architects is odd. I don't think we've ever had a spot for certain professionals. So usually there's always at-large resident seats. What I would suggest is that we have a committee of 7, one finance committee, one designee from the finance committee, from the selectmen, from capital planning, the director of the library. I think it's terrific that you want to be on this and you're going to bring a very good perspective. One trustee, so that'll essentially give the library 2 votes as opposed to the other committees each have 1. And then 2 residents at large who may or may not be architects. They can be anything they want.
Okay.
And then that committee can name associates as it sees fit. That'll give you 7, with the library having a slightly more representation if you include the director and 1 trustee. Does that sound?
Okay.
Does that sound
that's
reasonable?
fair.
What do my fellow selectmen think of that?
I think that sounds like a fine idea. And
I have to say, I appreciate Tina's direction and strength that she's bringing to this project already. She's one of our new staff members, and I very much appreciate her input on this. Any other selectmen have any comments on this?
So far, so good.
Okay.
the only other thing I was going to say, Jim, is I support your thought that the committee can then appoint, a number of associates as they feel fit, or will augment the committee,
Right.
and which we've done in the past, a number of times. And the way we've treated them before is always that they get full say in everything, they just don't get a vote.
Yeah, and Tina, the only thing that really, on these building committees, rarely are there close votes. But the one thing to keep in mind is that associates don't count for purposes of a quorum.
Okay.
Okay? So you always need a majority of the members, of the actual members of the committee.
So then my question would be, since I do not reside in Stow, would I be part of the vote?
Yes, because you would be a
Okay.
member of the committee.
Okay.
So we'll have to put together, actually, what we'll do is, in this motion, we will organize a committee with the officials that we've just named, plus 2 at-large members.
Okay.
And we'll post the vacancies for the at-large members for at least 30 days. Okay?
Okay.
So, kind of modifying on the fly the motion, can I get a motion to establish a Randall Library Building Committee composed of designees of the Finance Committee, the Selectmen, and Capital Planning, also the Library Director, 1 library trustee to be named by the library trustees, and 2 at-large residents.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to create, I'll do the rest of it later. To create a new Randall Library Building Committee composed in the manner that I just set forth. Further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those, I gotta do a roll call. Ms. Frasia?
Actually, I had one
Yes.
question under discussion. In the motions that I see a formal discontinuation of the former building committee, do we need to attend to that first?
No, because that was formed by the trustees and they already disbanded it.
Yes.
Any further discussion? Did that answer your question, Courtney?
Yes, thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, we'll go to a vote. Ms. Frasia?
Aye.
Mr. Burke?
Aye.
Mr. Ryan?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. And now, do I have a motion to
Would
further...
you like me to read this?
You read the last paragraph?
I move that to designate the Randall Library Building Committee as special municipal employees pursuant to Mass General Law C-268A. Members must be registered voters of Stow, with the exception of the library director, and all must agree to comply with state ethics and open meeting law requirements.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded. Thank you for amending on the fly, Mr. Ryan. For those of you watching at home, the practical effect of this, typically the Chapter 268A prevents someone from having 2 offices in town, in any municipality. In a small town, that's often impractical. For example, I'm going to be a selectman and hopefully a member of this committee. So we always designate all members of every volunteer committee to be, as well as all town employees, so they can serve on committee and have dual roles. We always designate them as special municipal employees. All right, further discussion?
But Tina doesn't get paid twice, though.
Tina does not get
come
paid.
on.
She does not get paid twice for this.
Thank you very much for your time.
Well-
This is great. Thank you.
We haven't voted yet. So
Okay, well.
on this second motion, Ms. Frasia
Aye.
and Mr. Burke,
Aye.
Mr. Ryan,
Aye.
and chair votes aye. Very good. Tina, thanks so much.
Thank you. This is great.
I don't know if you want to share the secret of what your maiden name is.
Oh, my maiden name is Salvi.
So that's why she's so good.
Yeah, well, I don't have the E on the end, but
That's
hey,
right, that's right.
That's better.
That's the right way to spell it, I hate to say it. All right, Tina, thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so, and now we have a discussion with the town clerk about the upcoming municipal election. Is Linda still here? Linda is here. Linda is muted right now. Can we unmute Linda? Linda? Huh. Oh,
Here I am.
there you are. You're unmuted. How are you?
I know, that's the only way you can get me to shut up, I guess.
You said that, not me, Linda.
I know,
Wow.
I know. I can talk to anybody here.
No, the one good thing about these Zoom meetings is I can mute Brian. So,
Yeah, I know. All right.
so
Why me?
why don't you take it away? I mean, I thought your materials were pretty clear about what you want to do, but for those who haven't had the benefit of reading this,
Sure, everybody, all the selectmen had the comments.
we had all this, yes.
So I'm proposing that on Saturday, June 27th, that our actual polling location and polling hours will be will be at the center school from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. It's a 6 hours of polling rather than the normal 13 hours. Typically, the town elections have a smaller turnout, except I think this year we have 3 contested races, so I do expect a very good turnout. But we're also encouraging everybody to vote by mail, to not have them in the polling location. So I think people, and we've gotten a good response so far. I've got 67 since we started advertising this a week ago. And then, of course, we're going to get more as the continued PR goes out. So we're strongly advocating that everybody vote for it by mail, and I don't think we're going to need 13 hours. And it also will help reduce the number of election workers that I'll have to have on hand as far as for checking people in. We still will need a number of people to process all these ballots, and I have no idea what to expect. It's so unusual. So people who want to vote in person will have that opportunity to do so, and can do so within the 6 hours that are proposed. The other thing is that several other towns, I did a little survey, and some towns have reduced the hours to 4. We have to be open a minimum of 4 hours for polling. It has to be open no later than noon, and we can end at, have to end no later than 8 p.m. So towns like Sherburne, they've gone to, they're considering 4 hours. Bolton is considering 4 hours. Sterling, I think, is doing 7. They're doing from noon to 7 p.m. But I think that the 10 a.m. will catch some people before they have to go off and do stuff, because I'm hoping that we will be released from our stay-at-home restrictions. But anyway, that's a brief overview of my comments.
And as you mentioned, since it's on a Saturday, it's not like we have to cover rush hour.
Correct. I'm sorry, I'm going to turn this up a little bit. I had turned it down. Yeah, so, right, most people on a Saturday, there will be, typically on a Saturday, on a regular election year, Saturdays, people are starting to get busy. They're doing their grocery shopping. They're doing all these other things. But some people aren't getting going until 8, 9 o'clock, getting out of the house. But here, and also too, under the COVID-19, anybody can get an absentee ballot and vote early. You don't have to have an excuse, which you would normally have to have for absentees. So I think it's easier to do this time around. So anyway, that's the purpose for my shortened hours.
Thank you, Linda. Members of the board, any comments on this?
Chair, no, wait.
Mr. Ryan?
Linda,
Yes.
If the, I'll say, state of emergency gets lifted, I take it that this is, I'll say, enshrined that we'll still be able to vote by mail,
Yes.
correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we've delayed this till June, this goes right through to our election, no matter what.
Now, one of the things I know that you and I have had conversations before, my feeling is that I'd like to go and vote in person.
So,
Right, but one of the things is, I think given the current situation, I'll make a statement now and kind of try to lead by example that I'll sign up for mail-in vote even though it's strongly not my preference.
Yeah.
So hopefully some other people will take note of this, and, you know, it's strange times, so we've got to kind of do some strange things, and I think the less time that your workers are in contact with people, hopefully the safer they'll be. So I'd ask other residents of town to please keep that in mind also.
so also, I just wanted to add on to that is I'm actually going to be doing a vote by mail ballot as well, because who knows?
Right.
I don't know if I'm going to be sick or not, or able to get there myself. I'm hoping that we'll be fine in my election. I can run an election because I've not missed one yet. The other thing is that I went to Bedford and assisted the Bedford clerk on March 14th. So I have a lot of ideas for social distancing and to keep our workers safe and anybody who comes and votes. So those are all taken into consideration as well.
So Mr. Burke had something he wanted to say?
I agree with the town clerk's recommendation and most of the justifications that have been advanced in support of that recommendation, but I want to go on record as disagreeing with rationale now 4 in the printed materials. Shorter polling hours may actually increase the success of vote by mail. I want to divorce myself of any kind of notion that we should hinder voters' access to the ballot just so that we can increase the numbers who vote by mail. Respectfully.
Okay. Ms. Fraser, have you got anything you want to add?
Just that I think it sounds like the clerk has considered as well and is trying to make opportunities for how voting will suit each individual, either in person or by mail. And I agree with Mr. Ryan. I would prefer to vote in person. I enjoy the forum of the election, of the polling site. I enjoy the social aspect of it, and this is unfortunately a time when I feel it is less prudent to be social in the ways that we're accustomed to, and I will also vote by mail.
All right, I think we all are in agreement. I found the memo to be pretty compelling, and besides, in your average municipal-only election, 13 hours of open polling is always, there's always a lot of downtime for the poll workers, and so this saves us a lot of money on that end. Do I have a motion?
I would make a motion in accord with Mass General Law, Chapter 54, Section 64. I move to reduce the polling hours for Stow's annual town election on Saturday, June 27th to 10 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Second.
So, okay, so that's accurate, right? That's what you wanted, Linda, 10 to 4?
Yes, please.
Okay. Further discussion? Seeing, hearing none, let's do roll call. Ms. Fraser.
Aye.
Mr. Burke.
Aye.
Mr. Ryan.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Very comprehensive memo.
Thank you.
As usual.
So, as usual, so one of the highlights of this meeting is the discussion of the fiscal '21 budget by the town administrator, which I think, fair to say, has been a bit of a moving target in light of changing revenue projections. And let me swivel the computer so the townspeople can see him. There he goes. He's all in all his glory.
Oh, wow. Special treatment. I appreciate it. Well, this was due over a month ago, but of course we've had to extend it twice. I provided you for Tuesday evening's meeting the current best budget that I've got. I would say this, there's one number that is still somewhat fluid, and the number I have in there now may change slightly, but it wouldn't change substantively. But before we go to print, I would take all of that time in the event that I need to tweak it a bit with the police department. Other than that, these are my best judgments and expectations, though to be truthful with you, I will preface it by saying something that you're all aware of, which is the revenues not only for the balance of this year, but going into some indefinite period for next year, both at the state and local level, is bound to be impacted by the consequences, continued consequences impacting our economy. And to the degree that the state will take all the time necessary, and it might take into the next fiscal year before we get final local aid numbers from the state. I'm predicting they won't have a state budget until sometime in next year. This year to date, revenues, state revenues are down on the tax side substantially. We're now almost at 25% unemployment in the state. So I would say this to you, that there is the possibility that the budget that I'm proposing, if passed at town meeting, and I'll have better ideas about our local revenues, property taxes, local receipts. The impacts are not yet fully known, but they will be by the time of town meeting, to let you know where I am. I might make recommendations as amended motions if they're substantive, meaning to say that the best information on the state for the following year is along the lines of reductions, depending on the amount. Doesn't impact our revenues as much as the schools. Local aid, non-school local aid is a very small percentage of my total revenues, but they're much larger when it comes to the schools. So they're going to have to re-examine. In any event, it might be that sometime next year we have to go back to a special town meeting to make adjustments to the budget that gets passed in the spring. But I continue to track it. I'll keep people apprised. I'll give you my best assumptions at that moment. But I think it's too early, it's too remote, too speculative. Any attempt to try to figure out what next year will bring until we've got better numbers, I don't think it's the prudent thing to do. We'll have an opportunity when we have actual state aid numbers, we see what the economy's doing, to go back into a special town meeting and make adjustments. So I just wanted to let you know about that before we go in. What I've got on the board right now for myself is a budget in 2021, which would represent just under a 2% decrease from this year's budget, 1.93%, which is good news. It's something that I think is so it's below level funding. So I think going forward with this budget at town meeting, unless, again, in the weeks between now and then, I've got more accurate figures that we're going to have to make an adjustment, I'll probably go with that, carry into the next year. The state probably is going to be doing that itself, but at minus 2%, that's a tight budget. As I typically do, if you look at my spreadsheet, the cover page, it works back to front. Cover page gives all the summaries, income on the top half, expenditures on the bottom. So I generally start with the taxes. The second page gives you the backup to bring forward to the front on the top with regard to the 2021 under my column, which says Budget Town Administrator / Selectmen recommend property tax. That number of $31,339,761 is a number that isn't meaningful because what it includes in there is our unused levy capacity. So if you go to the second page, the number that is most meaningful under that same column is that we take this year's tax levy, we increase it by 2.5%, add new growth, and the number of 350,000, that's a number the assessors gave me back in March. There's no information that would affect the change in that right now, so I think it's solid. It is conservative. Below that for the Prop 2.5 levy limit, those three numbers give us a 3.75% increase, and that's, to me, the meaningful number. Again, we're carrying so much unused levy capacity that it distorts. That is the full available taxing authority that we have in Stow, but at the bottom of the first page, you go back, you'll see drop to the bottom under budget surplus. We call it budget surplus. Once the budget's voted and appropriated, it'll become unused levy capacity. We've got $3 million of unused levy capacity. So it distorts the meaningfulness of it. But that is theoretically the total amount that we could raise taxes within Prop 2.5 without an override. Back up top on the first page, we've unloaded the annual debt payment has been unburdened by paying the final payment on the Hale School. What that also does, though, is it reduces our revenues by $542,852, which you notice under the school building assistance. 2020 was the last year, 542, that disappears. It's zero in the next. Below that, we netted about $225,000 between the reduction in our annual portion of the debt payment for the school. It was $740-something. The state was providing $542,000 as a reimbursement on the revenue side. We had to pay the full amount on the expense side under the debt schedule. But we netted between the revenue loss and the reduced burden for the debt payment about $232,000. I'll get to the annual debt payment for next year down below. Under local receipts, I'm estimating $2,220,900, which shows a significant increase over the current year, but that was the budgeted amount for that year for local receipts. I do budget to actuals month by month. This would represent $2,220,900, 6% less than what we actually took in at the end of the FY19 year. So what I'm estimating, though it's an increase of what I budgeted last year, it's 6% less than what we actually took in, so I think that's a safe number. I'm expecting that local receipts are going to be impacted next year, probably negatively, the balance of this year to some degree as well, and I'll know it at the end, but I think 6 months will cover that gap. So I think that's a safe number. Those are the significant numbers of income above for operations. The next section down in the upper half, income used for capital outlays. As I do each year, I apply a sum of money from free cash for non-borrowing capital articles. I'm doing $500,000 this year, and I'm taking another $235,000 from free cash to pay for our annual OPEB contribution. So the total amount of stored asset use in this budget is $735,000, which is substantially less than what we had to put in for this year for all of those capital items that we funded. I think that's a fair amount. I would say this, if we get into significant trouble going into next year, reduction in state aid, the schools have to make an adjustment because they've gotten less on it. What I'm looking at for the annual town meeting is some discussion about our capital and our OPEB. Those are the two big money items. They're not day-to-day operations. They don't affect the staff and the rest of it, which I would protect. So it might be that at our annual town meeting, I'm making some mention of the capital articles and the overlay surplus. And what we're going to need, if things go bad for us next year during the fiscal year, at any moment after we set our tax rate in the fall, the only thing I'll have available, short of cutting the budgets, would be to go back in and use stored assets if we felt that was the more prudent thing to do rather than cutting further, and capital. So I would start at that level before going into the operating budget for cuts. So that's just a priority for me at this moment. I don't know that we'll need to do anything, but if we do, that would be my first cut. Then I work my down to non-capital special articles. I'll work further down into that to expenses, and then in the end, if we need to cut or furlough, layoff workers, we would do that. Not had to do any layoffs of any workers in the entire time I've been here for 28 years. I would hope that isn't necessary, but I'll have a plan for all of that. Whatever the impacts are for next year that might affect this budget voted at the annual town meeting, we can go back in and make adjustments to it if necessary. So in any event, the last piece up above of substantive income is the overlay surplus. And essentially overlay surplus is what we annually call overlay reserve for abatements and people who challenge their tax assessments. And on an annual basis, that's an estimate, depending on who might challenge their tax assessments. If the total amount each year in the reserve is not used, it accumulates and it becomes surplus, and each year I get some of that back. Once the accountant and the assessors have determined that they don't have it for any need, and that's past years, then I take it. I'm using $100,000, and I checked in early March, it was only at 75. I tweaked it some, thinking that that would be a safe figure. Based on past years, it's less, but it's, and again, when the tax recap is done, we can make any adjustment there, but I think that's a conservative figure. End up with a total income of $35,150,538. Before I go to the expenditures, any questions on the revenues on the top half?
So I noticed state aid, you're budgeting a slight increase over last year.
Yeah, I'm using the governor's number there. It's the only budget on the,
All right, okay.
you know, that will only be known once the state budget is passed, but I have to put a plug number in. The governor's on the board, I used his.
Okay.
But again, it's a smaller figure and it's not gonna change, I don't think, too much, so. But that's the source of that amount.
I'm good. Anybody on the board? All right, I take it as a no.
Okay, so bottom half of the front page, expenditures. General municipal budget total, my column represents a 3% increase over this year. That's all of our departmental budgets, all of our townwide insurances, and the rest of it. That's salary and expenses. I've got no new hires in there, no increases in hours. It's pretty much, if you've got a step increase coming, I did have, those are all in there. There's a 2.5% cost of living for everybody in there. But as I said, no new employees and no increase in hours. We are waiting on that townwide employee survey that has both compensation and staffing levels in it. We got slowed down here in the last couple of months. As soon as we're able to get back together, we'll have a final draft to look at, and then that will be published. Then, from my perspective, depending on what we have available to us in the year following, these are gonna be recommendations by the consultant, that's all they'll be. But they'll include, and we got fortunate here because Boxborough was doing one at the same time we were, and we're gonna probably double the number of towns. We're not saying we accept all of the methodology and such, but it will broaden the sample. And I think that's helpful to us. So there'll have to be a decision made by the Board of Selectmen, okay, here are the results. And from my perspective, even though I'm leaving at the end of August, what do we do with it? My feeling is we don't just accept all of it, and the consultant will be here to provide the methodology, what was behind the decisions, questions can be answered. We've been doing a lot of that as a working group with the employees who have been involved throughout the process on job description vests. Well, the town will have to decide, okay.
That's obviously something the new town administrator is going to have to get comfortable with and weigh in.
Right, so that's for him. But I just wanted to let you know that that's where we are with it, and it will be something we'll, as a working group next year, we'll have to look at how much of that, to what degree, for whom, and there's a lot there. But hasn't been forgotten. It'll be ready soon. Under the next one down, the Neshoba Regional School District Assessment. Again, as they have for the last few years, Neshoba's, we've been very fortunate with our assessment. It was actually a slight decrease for this year from 19, a little less than 1% decrease in the assessment. This year it's only going up 1.37%. But as I said, when the state numbers are finally known for next year's budget, they may have to go look because it's a much higher percentage of their revenues than ours for the non-municipal aid.
Well, that's what I was going to ask about. For us, because our direct state aid is such a small percentage of our revenue,
Right.
if there's a substantial cut in state aid, this is the line item we're going to see.
For the schools, you mean?
For the schools.
Yeah, so they may have, we've had those discussions, so they're doing what we're doing. We're doing the what-if speculation,
Right.
somewhat remote. I think they're doing what I'm doing. I'm gonna sit tight until we've got real numbers.
Right.
Otherwise, I think you overreact or underreact. There's too many things that I don't like remote and speculative. I just, and there'll be a period of time where it'll be known. And we'll still have time, once it's known, what to do about it. But right now, we were helped again. It's the third year in a row that the district, in part, they cut in their budgets to get down to a number that would make, that all three of the towns, Lancaster and Bolton, more than we were, in a financial position that they needed a bottom line number, and the schools worked hard to get to it, involving some cuts. So again, I pay tribute to them for that, because they're the single, by much large number, the most significant revenue number I have. So our budget goes where theirs goes. So 1.37%. Now, Minuteman, on the other hand, goes up 50%. They were here to explain it. It's fully loading up the debt for the new school project. That's a big driver. And the second is our student enrollment went up. It's expensive. So that's something to watch going forward in the years to come. As it grows, as more students go at 38,000 per, that number can become substantive, significant in the years to come. Our debt service. So the other half of the equation on the debts with regard to retirement of the Hill School debt, and we lost $542,000 on the revenue side, but we reduced our annual debt payment by $588,000. There were a couple other smaller things we unloaded, but that was the biggest part of it, right? So this year's annual debt payment was $2,039,619, estimated for next year. $2,627,933. Estimated for next year is $2,039,619, which is a 22% decrease. So that's big, obviously, reducing the annual debt payment by that kind of number. It's going to provide some debt cushion going forward for some of these projects that are pending, irrespective of the nature and extent of the scope of those projects. They're all going to be borrowing for the building projects that you were talking about. PFAS, which I'll get into at the end, it doesn't affect this budget because it's the first payment. I'm going to advocate borrowing for it, but that's something going forward we're going to have to look at, as well as those other projects that are going to all be borrowing. The raise and appropriate special articles are just, all of the special articles that are non-capital that are on page 12, I think. No, on page 10. And most of these are routine. What I would notice, if you go to page 10, I did increase the reserve fund transfer, given the request by the FinCom, and so give them a $10,000 a year increase. Legal services, I beefed up from 30 to 50 because of just increased activity with lawsuits and other matters, and my uncertainty going forward. Some of the PFAS, I don't know to what degree legal will be included, but I wanted to provide a buffer for that. At the same time, I'm going to allow a little room under that article at the annual town meeting for the first year of PFAS for other technical reasons, which would include legal, so I can play both sides. I have to see what I got. But just thought, given the increase in activity that's in sustained activity, ZBA, other things, I'm going to spend about that this year. And I think there'll be some reduction, but I want to cut it too close. But year to date, with 2 months left, that's about where I'll be here, but there's some things that I know I will reduce, and I don't think the added increase will go above that, so I'll put 50 in. The other things, if you go down the list, unemployment compensation at the bottom, didn't have any in that line item for a while, but as I think I told you, the way the statute reads now, we have to pay for employees who are left here not having been laid off here, but freely left to go to another job. But if they got laid off there, the law now allows them to go back to the previous employers. I mean, there's no way of getting out of not paying for employees. The state will not do it. So I had to beef that up, and we were deficient. And it's all online now, and the state says they've been taking money for people who have left us, gone somewhere else, and it was missed downstairs online, and so we've got to make up for what they're saying we owe them for and put a little extra in. So I beefed that up. And I beefed the audit line item up, because even with the ongoing activities we got there, we're going to probably need a little extra, though I don't know that. So it's 12.5, and I added basically 12.5 to it for 25. Don't think I'll need all of that, but I'm carrying it in any event. So those are the notable.
So, thank you, and I hate to say this, I need to speed this up. Town council's already logged in, and
Okay.
his meter's running, as we know. Questions?
So I've got the bottom line, 1.93 negative.
Questions from members of the board?
It's better than plus 1.93. Fine job, Bill.
We'll get through it one way or the other.
Bill, what are our current free cash and stabilization fund balances? I don't know, but...
All right, so after, we spent quite a bit at the last fall town meeting, if you remember, we had like 6 or 7 items, they all came out of free cash, and right now, I have $2,547,603, and an approximate balance on the stabilization account without current interest of about $500,000, so we're at a little over $3 million, $3 million for stored assets, $3,047,603. I've got 735 on the board for this upcoming town meeting. If you take that out, we net at the end of the year $2,312,603, which is a percentage against what this budget expenditures are, will give us 7.2%. So that's right in the middle between the 5 and the 10 that we try to hit. I think that's a pretty good spot for all the things that we've taken out through free cash, particularly this last year and last fall.
So it's a pretty tight budget. I mean, obviously, overall, it's it's a decrease. Even if you just look at the operating budget itself, it's essentially the cost of the COLA. It's really pretty expensive. It's impressive. The wild card right now is the Neshoba assessment. There's nothing we can do about that at the moment. Questions from members of the board?
My only question is, Mr. Town Administrator, are you sure you wouldn't stay another year?
You know what?
Don't forget, he's going to stay part-time after the new person starts. So,
That is a compliment.
yeah, no, we're in, I think it's amazing that a town with $3 million in stored assets is also having a conversation about all the capital items coming down the pike. But Bill, you should be very proud. You're leaving us with a very good budget. And it's a little bit better than when you started.
Yes, that's true. Took me 5 years to get out of the negative.
All right, I don't mean to rush us along, especially not through something quite that important. But, you know, I don't like town council sitting there with the meter running. We do want to have a discussion about where we stand on the acting police chief matter. Mr. Town Administrator, if you take that.
Sure. So, as you know, you appointed Darren Train, Sergeant Train, as the emergency appointment coming out of the events from the previous Saturday, where he was appointed by the exiting chief as the acting. He agreed to stay for 3 weeks, and so we have to find a longer-term acting, though I don't think we'd have, by longer term, I don't mean, I mean some weeks, maybe adds into 2 months, maybe 3 at the outside. But we have to do it, so I had to post it. The deadline for posting is a week from today, and then I hope to be able to provide a recommendation for the longer-term acting appointment at your next meeting. And so I believe we're going. I believe we'll have a choice. And so application's in. I come in with a recommendation on your next meeting. That's my game plan.
Well, that's okay with me, and we think it's probably going to be internal candidates.
We've got interest internally, and we've got interest from a retiree.
Okay. Questions from members of the board? We'll know more at our next meeting. Okay, I'll take that as no questions. All right, can we do a really abbreviated liaison reports and then go into our executive session? Can I start with Ms. Frasia?
Yes, the only thing I think I have to report is that the SMOT and Community Committee have reached agreement on their article for some emergency rental assistance program using CPA funds. So that would be going to town meeting.
I think that language has already been transmitted to our office for the warrant.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Frasia. Mr. Burke?
Nothing worth talking about now.
Okay. Mr. Ryan?
I've talked to Sergeant Solis and Sergeant Thrain. They're working very well together, keeping the department going. And both of them had very high praise for the dispatchers.
Yes.
Who had been taking some interesting phone calls, shall we say. But the department's doing well. And fire department is working out well. They've got all the personal protective equipment they need right now, and they're all healthy. So
I'm glad you mentioned it. I just want to, I had similar conversations. I want to go into a little more detail. The first few days after the events with Marino, the police department were getting some horribly rude phone calls. I believe largely, if not exclusively, for people out of town. And the dispatchers were taking the brunt of it. And again, these are people, we have no reason to think they did anything wrong. And they handled it like professionals. And we very much appreciate that.
Yep. And both Sergeant Thrain and Sergeant Solis were very, very complimentary of the professionalism, as you mentioned.
My own report, just capital planning, the number is going to be lower than that 764 number that you see in the budget, and I think it's going to be a fair amount lower. We've made recommendations on just about everything. And if I could find it, I could give the chart to the town administrator, but I can't find it right now. Had a conversation with Ross Perry, chair of the town administrator search committee. They interviewed 9 individuals. 8 of them they think are very good, and they're going to whittle that down to 3 to 5. He said it's going to be difficult to whittle it down. They had some very good candidates, so that's encouraging. They're completing their work sooner than we thought, and so we will be getting those names sooner than we thought. And I don't see any reason to wait, so we'll be taking it up slightly sooner than we originally thought. Okay? If there's nothing else, may I have a motion to go into executive session? We will not be returning to open session.
I'll make that motion. I move to convene an executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A5, for the purpose of investigating charges of criminal misconduct.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to convene an executive session pursuant to Chapter 30A, Section 21A5, for the purpose of investigating charges of criminal misconduct. We will not be returning to open session. This requires a roll call vote. And Selectmen, you know how this works on Zoom. You have a separate code and password for the executive session. Ms. Frazier.
Aye.
Mr. Burke. Mr. Burke. Mr. Ryan.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Mr. Burke, you with us?
Yes, I am.
And how do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you. That's
I
unanimous.
had problems with the mute.
Yes. All right, very good. See you on the other side.